Have you ever wondered why you reach for your phone the moment you feel uncomfortable? Or why you find yourself working late into the night, even when there's no real deadline? What about that glass of wine that somehow became 2, 3, or more whenever stress hits? We all have ways of dealing with life's challenges. We call them coping mechanisms, and on the surface, they seem harmless, even helpful. But what if I told you that some of these behaviors you've normalized might actually be red flags? What if the very strategies you use to feel better are actually signs of unresolved trauma? This isn't about judgment or shame. It's about understanding. Because when we can recognize the difference between healthy coping and trauma responses, we open the door to genuine healing and freedom. Today, we're going to explore the hidden world of coping mechanisms and uncover when they cross the line from helpful to harmful. More importantly, we'll discover what they're really trying to tell us about our inner world. What are coping mechanisms really? Let's start with the basics. Coping mechanisms are the strategies we use to manage stress, emotional pain, or difficult situations. They're our mind's way of protecting us from overwhelming feelings or experiences. Some coping mechanisms are healthy and adaptive. Think about deep breathing when you're anxious, calling a friend when you're sad, or going for a walk when you need to clear your head. These strategies help us process emotions and move through challenges in a constructive way. But then there are the other kinds, the ones that provide temporary relief but don't actually solve anything. These are often called maladaptive coping mechanisms, and they can range from seemingly innocent habits to more obviously destructive behaviors. The tricky part? Many of these behaviors don't feel problematic at first. They work, at least temporarily. They numb the pain, distract from discomfort, or give us a sense of control when everything feels chaotic. But here's where it gets interesting. When coping mechanisms become our primary way of dealing with life, when we can't function without them, or when they start creating more problems than they solve, they might be telling us something deeper about our emotional landscape. The hidden connection between trauma and coping. Trauma doesn't always look like what we see in movies. It's not always dramatic, obvious, or even remembered clearly. Sometimes trauma is subtle, chronic stress, emotional neglect, feeling unsafe, or experiencing situations where our needs weren't met consistently. When we experience trauma, especially in childhood, our nervous system learns to be hypervigilant. It's constantly scanning for threats, real or perceived. This state of heightened alertness is exhausting, so our mind develops strategies to cope with this chronic stress. These strategies often become so automatic that we don't even realize we're using them. They become part of our personality, our daily routine, our way of being in the world. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a leading trauma researcher, explains that trauma fundamentally changes how we experience safety in our own bodies. When we don't feel safe internally, we develop external strategies to manage that discomfort. This is where coping mechanisms come in. They're not just random habits. They're often sophisticated survival strategies that helped us navigate difficult situations. The problem is that what helped us survive in the past might be limiting us in the present. Common coping mechanisms that might signal trauma. Let's explore some of the most common coping mechanisms that could indicate unresolved trauma. Remember, having these behaviors doesn't automatically mean you're traumatized, but they might be worth examining more closely. 1. Perfectionism and overachievement. Do you find yourself working obsessively, never feeling like anything you do is good enough? Perfectionism often develops as a way to feel safe and worthy. If love and approval felt conditional in childhood, you might have learned that being perfect was the only way to avoid rejection or criticism. The trauma connection. Perfectionism can be a way of controlling your environment and ensuring you won't be abandoned or criticized. It's a protective mechanism that says, if I'm flawless, I'll be safe. 2. People-pleasing and difficulty setting boundaries. Are you the person who always says yes, even when you want to say no? Do you find yourself constantly worried about what others think of you? People-pleasing often develops when we learn early that our own needs don't matter as much as keeping others happy. The trauma connection. If expressing your needs or preferences led to conflict, rejection, or punishment in the past, you might have learned that keeping others happy is the safest strategy. 3. Emotional numbing and avoidance. This can look like constantly staying busy, binge-watching shows, endless scrolling on social media, or using substances to avoid feeling. When emotions feel too overwhelming or dangerous, numbing becomes a way to survive. The trauma connection. If emotions weren't safe to express, or if they were met with dismissal or punishment, your nervous system might have learned that feeling nothing is safer than feeling everything. 4. Hypervigilance and control issues. Do you find yourself constantly scanning your environment for potential problems? Are you always planning for worst-case scenarios? This heightened state of alertness often develops when we've experienced unpredictable or unsafe situations. The trauma connection. When your environment felt chaotic or dangerous, your nervous system learned to stay alert to protect you. This hypervigilance can persist long after the original threat is gone. The subtle signs you might be missing. Not all trauma-related coping mechanisms are obvious. Some are so socially acceptable that we might not recognize them as problematic. Here are some subtle signs to watch for. Chronic busyness. Always having something to do, feeling uncomfortable with stillness or quiet moments. This can be a way of avoiding internal experiences that feel threatening. Difficulty receiving help or compliments. If accepting support feels uncomfortable or dangerous, it might indicate early experiences where vulnerability led to hurt or disappointment. Extreme independence. While independence is generally positive, extreme self-reliance can sometimes indicate a learned belief that depending on others isn't safe. Difficulty identifying emotions. If you often feel fine or struggle to name what you're feeling, it might indicate emotional numbing or disconnection developed as protection. Physical symptoms without clear medical cause. Chronic headaches, digestive issues, or muscle tension can sometimes be the body's way of expressing emotional distress that can't be processed mentally. When coping becomes a problem. How do you know when your coping mechanisms have crossed the line from helpful to harmful? Here are some key indicators. Frequency and intensity. If you find yourself relying on certain behaviors multiple times a day or feeling panicked when you can't engage in them, they might be more than just coping strategies. Impact on relationships. When your coping mechanisms start affecting your relationships, whether it's working so much you miss important events or being so focused on pleasing others that you lose yourself, they might be causing more harm than good. Diminishing returns. If you need more and more of something to feel the same relief, whether it's work, shopping, social media, or substances, your coping mechanism might be becoming problematic. Avoiding growth. If your coping strategies are keeping you from facing important life challenges or growing as a person, they might be holding you back rather than helping you move forward. Physical or emotional consequences. When your coping mechanisms start creating new problems, health issues, financial stress, relationship conflicts, it's time to examine whether they're truly serving you. The difference between coping and healing. Here's something crucial to understand. Coping and healing are not the same thing. Coping helps us manage symptoms and get through difficult moments. Healing addresses the root causes and creates lasting change. Healthy coping strategies help us process emotions and move through challenges. They're temporary tools that support us while we work through difficulties. Trauma-based coping mechanisms, on the other hand, often keep us stuck in patterns that prevent real healing. Think of it this way. If you have a broken leg, taking pain medication helps you cope with the discomfort, but it doesn't heal the bone. Similarly, many of our coping mechanisms manage emotional pain without addressing the underlying wounds. This doesn't mean all coping mechanisms are bad. Sometimes we need temporary relief while we build the capacity for deeper healing. The key is recognizing when coping strategies are helping us move forward versus when they're keeping us stuck. The path forward, from coping to healing. If you recognize yourself in some of these patterns, don't panic. Recognition is actually the first step toward healing. Here's how you can begin to shift from trauma-based coping to genuine healing. 1. Practice self-compassion. Remember that your coping mechanisms develop for good reasons. They help you survive difficult situations. Instead of judging yourself, try to appreciate the creativity and resilience your mind showed in protecting you. 2. Increase awareness. Start noticing when you engage in certain behaviors. What triggers them? What are you feeling right before you reach for your coping mechanism? This awareness helps you understand the function these behaviors serve. 3. Explore the underlying needs. Ask yourself, what does this behavior try to give me? Safety? Comfort? Control? Connection? Once you understand the underlying need, you can find healthier ways to meet it. 4. Build tolerance for discomfort. Many trauma-based coping mechanisms develop because certain emotions or sensations feel intolerable. Gradually building your capacity to sit with discomfort through mindfulness, therapy, or other practices can reduce the need for numbing or avoidance. 5. Seek professional support. Working with a trauma-informed therapist can provide you with tools and support for addressing underlying wounds. Therapies like EMDR, somatic experiencing, or cognitive behavioral therapy can be particularly helpful. Creating new patterns. Healing doesn't happen overnight, and it's not about perfection. It's about gradually creating new patterns that serve your growth rather than just your survival. Start small. If you notice you reach for your phone when you're anxious, try taking 3 deep breaths instead. If you tend to overwork when stressed, experiment with setting a timer and taking breaks. The goal isn't to eliminate all coping mechanisms. It's to develop a toolkit of strategies that actually support your well-being and growth. This might include things like regular movement or exercise, creative expression, meaningful connections with others, mindfulness or meditation practices, time in nature, journaling, or other forms of self-reflection. Remember, the coping mechanisms that served you in the past deserve gratitude, not shame. They helped you survive. But as you grow and heal, you can choose strategies that help you thrive. The gift of awareness. Your coping mechanisms aren't your enemy. They're messengers. They're trying to tell you something about what you need, what you fear, and what you're protecting. When you can listen to these messages with curiosity rather than judgment, you open the door to profound healing and growth. The journey from trauma-based coping to genuine healing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. On the other side of this work, you'll find not just relief from symptoms, but a deeper sense of authenticity, connection, and peace. So the question isn't whether you have coping mechanisms. We all do. The question is, are yours helping you grow, or are they keeping you stuck? And more importantly, are you ready to find out? Because awareness is the first step toward freedom. If this video resonated with you, if you recognize some of these patterns in your own life, know that you're not alone. Recognition is the first courageous step toward true healing. Subscribe to the channel for more content based on Dr. Gabor Maté's transformative teachings. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss any insights that could change your perspective on trauma, healing, and self-awareness. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Sometimes, a single reflection can be the catalyst for a healing journey. And remember, your coping mechanisms don't define you. They are just messengers. True freedom begins when you learn to listen to them with compassion. See you in the next video. Until then, be gentle with yourself